Some of the small details are as important as the larger picture. During the course of this project, we have discussed the musical, aesthetic, and narrative side, but glossed over the technical side of how some of these elements were created. Here are some of the little details that would otherwise be overlooked, but without which the project would not be able to function. They may look simple and insignificant, but they deserve to be recognized for their roles. This object serves an important role in the guitar strum subpatch. When a user moves too fast, the dial that is connected to their hand, which sends the message to strum each string, skips a few numbers, causing a clunky and disjointed strum. This object simply takes the last two numbers output by the dial and outputs a positive difference between the numbers, counting all the numbers in between. This selection of objects is vital for the melody. It takes the basic chord information, detects the length of the list, and repeats it, increasing the octave each time it is repeated. This list can then be applied to the 12 potential thresholds that determine the tones of the melody. In this same subpatch, we can see the dials that control the threshold locations are distributed evenly between 0 and 0.95. This had to be made so that the distribution changed depending on the number of strings needed to be available. This is done by taking the number of strings the user wants, n, and scaling each number between 0 and n from 0 to 95, and dividing them by 100. Each number is then sent into the scale and assigned to a particular dial. You may notice that all of the unused dials are deactivated. This is controlled by the section on the right. The guitar voicing subpatch has two very important subpatches within it. The first is the cage subpatch. The cage system is a way for guitarists to play any chord in any position on the neck, as they all follow the same order: C shape, A shape, G shape, E shape, and D shape. All you need is the position of the root note nearest the chosen location on the fretboard, and you will be able to choose the correct voicing. The cage subpatch takes the root note of the chord and compares it to the 6 open guitar strings tuned to E standard, depending on the capo, finding the nearest root note, deciding which shape is appropriate. The second subpatch in the guitar voicing is the shapes patch. The patch itself is not particularly interesting as it has a massive amount of wires hooked up to bangs in very specific ways. To understand it, we must look below it. Here, we can see the basic notes of the chord and some plus objects. Simply put, the shapes subpatch tells us in which order and which octaves to output these numbers and how many notes to include, as the C shape and A shape only have 5 notes and the D shape only has 4. A hidden unused feature of this patch is the ability to voice 7th, 9th, 11th, and 13th chords. This is because an earlier version of the project had the ability to play these chords, and some remnants of this feature are left in the project. This feature had to be dropped to preserve the ability for the user to easily create nice sounding chord progressions. This is a simple device which can be used for many purposes and has had a major impact on the project. When using MIDI data in Max, programmers often use a modulo 12 object. This takes the remainder of a number after dividing it by 12, meaning the programmer can determine which note the number represents. A side effect of this is that when a B note is played, it is 11 semitones higher than a C note, when in reality you would simply play the B note below the C, with a distance of only 1 semitone. To combat this, the note 6 semitones above the root note is taken and placed into an if statement. If the number coming in on the left is more than 6 semitones above the root, it is sent to a -12 object, moving it to an octave below, which has a shorter distance. This object is most noticeable in the piano subpatch. Here, the dial is compared to the incoming chord, and each note within the chord is positioned to be as close as possible to the note represented by the dial. This replicates the hand position whilst playing piano,